Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have back on the show human trafficking, satanic ritual abuse, and Jesuit mind control survivor and whistleblower, published writer and author, artist, mother, educator, blogger, and one of our most beloved and requested guests, podcast regular, Svali. A short overview about Svali in case you're new here, or in case you guys missed any of Svali's episodes on the show. Svali has been a voice for survivors for years now through her blogs, Svali Speaks and Svali Speaks Again, and the books she has authored, including Breaking Free of Cult Programming, which has helped lay the foundations for what we know today about cults, trauma-based mind control, deprogramming, secret societies, including the Jesuit order, the history of the Illuminati, and so much more, as well as her brand new three-part testimony series, Never Give Up, which gives a first-time deep dive into her own testimony in life. Born and raised in a cult and having experienced horrors beyond comprehension, Svali broke free of her cult group several years ago and has been on a quest to share the knowledge that she has learned from personal experience to help set others free. There are years of eye-opening information on her blogs, and her books give a very concise and no-nonsense look at the underworld of mind control and the underlying mechanisms to which it is orchestrated, used generationally, and hidden from society. If you haven't yet immersed yourself in the treasure trove of Svali's appearances on this channel, let me please urge you to do yourself a favor and dive in. Every episode she's done, whether here on this platform or across the podcast scene on other shows, is a gem waiting to be uncovered. Beyond that, dive into her blog, her books, and anything she's touched with her voice, pen, or spirit. Svali's work isn't just remarkable, it's revolutionary. She's a trailblazer whose courage and insight have carved the path for the survivor movement to rise into the amazing force that it is today. The last time Svali graced us with her presence, we had a very rich variety of topics mapped out, including her personal journey toward healing, practical wisdom for trauma recovery, and a fearless plunge into the murky depths of Delta and Immortal programming. But as we spoke, the conversation took on a life of its own, flowing deep into the calming waters of healing. On a whim, we decided to split that episode into two parts, saving the rest for today. Now the wait is over. We're diving into the much anticipated exploration of Delta and Immortals programming, specifically how these sinister mechanisms are wielded within the Jesuit order to lock away and store memories and skills. Svali's shared revelations spring from her own lived experience within the world of the Jesuit order, offering a piercing glimpse into one facet of mind control, not a universal blueprint into all programming methods, but a powerful piece of the puzzle. A quick note as well to survivors, since we're venturing into sensitive territory today, including mind control programming parts and systems, please tread gently and honor your own boundaries with this trigger warning. What Svali brings to the table is no less than decades of relentless dedication, years spent unraveling the chains of mind control she was once beholden to and forging a roadmap for recovery. Talks with Svali are lanterns in the dark, wellsprings of hope and clarity for anyone yearning to break free from manipulation and cult abuse's shadows. So set aside the noise, lean in, and listen closely. This episode isn't just mere conversation, it's meant to be a transformative lesson from a warrior who's battled through the darkness to shine a light on the unseen. Svali stands before us today as a living testament as the unconquerable fire of the human spirit. Her escape from the clutches of cult control to the wide open plains of freedom is nothing short of awe-inspiring. It's a miracle in motion. We are privileged beyond measure to once again welcome her wisdom, her voice, and her light. Today's conversation will be a spark into what's been hidden in the dark and a gift from a pioneer whose voice doesn't just echo, but roars. Join us today as Svali speaks and unveils truth that doesn't just unform, it transforms. So let's dig in. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd love to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, sharing any information privately with me, or submitting a written testimony for my upcoming book series, or to be featured on a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you exclusive discount codes on products I personally love, such as Rife Technology frequency machines and CZTL's premium methylene blue. You can find all the relevant links, codes, along with other resources in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X following the termination of my former YouTube channel. I've just started a new YouTube channel you can subscribe to at the handle Imagination Podcast Official that I will be rebuilding as well. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue sharing vital information with the public and the disclosure community. Thank you all wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming back today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, woman of God, overcomer, walking miracle, a beautiful soul, dear friend, and someone who continues to help many break free from cult programming by showing them what's possible. The one, the only, Svali. Svali, thank you so much for being here again with us today. It's great to have you back.
Emma, thank you for having me again. And wow, what an intro. Well, I always enjoy talking with you. And so I appreciate the chance just to be here and to share a little bit that I hope will be helpful.
It's
Okay.
very, very helpful. And I know last time in the intro, I had mentioned that we'll be talking about the topics of today. So last episode was really valuable. We got a lot of great feedback. And it's honestly really cool just to hear more about your story. You've spent so much time helping other people, and it's neat to just get more of a personal account of things that you've learned along your way. I know everybody's journey
Mhm.
is individual, but that was a really healing episode, and I personally learned a lot and took a lot from it too. So I'm excited to dive into part two today, but wanted
Mhm.
to give you the opportunity to share kind of a disclaimer on your part as well
Yeah.
before we get
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, because I just want to make it clear that when I share things, I'm sharing how the Jesuit order did their programming, but not all survivors of occultic abuse or mind control are going to be programming in the same way. And so I don't mean to ever, when I'm talking, to imply that this is the only way that programming is done, or that even most survivors would go through it in the same way, because different groups have different agendas. And even within one organization, people may be programmed in different ways, depending on their role and their own innate, abilities and different things. So if anyone listening is a survivor and they have memories of programming that differ from what I'm sharing, I always tell people always prioritize your own memories and information over anything that I or anyone else shares. So I only am describing how one group does its programming according to what I experienced as a survivor. And I really, it's not meant to be a universal description of programming or how it's done, but just a general look at things. I thought today I'm going to start with the Delta system, which is, that is the Jesuit memory storage and skill storage system. So I thought I would start sharing a little bit about that.
Let's do it.
Okay. So basically, the Delta system, as I said, stores memories and skills according to security level. And so the Delta system is a very computerized system. In fact, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the intro to the Matrix with all the dots and some of those things, like rolling around through the screen. If you could look inside of Delta system, that's what it looks like on the inside. It looks like these computer banks with lights and numbers going. But on the outside, it's called Delta City, and it's a tetrahedron. It's a double tetrahedron with a white tetrahedron on top. That's white delta, and a black tetrahedron on the bottom, and that's black delta. And I'll talk about their differences in a minute. But it's um the the white deltas the white deltas store the presentation memories. It would be your apparently normal person out in various, if you're in a country or various countries. So, like the American memories, the French memories, the German memories, when I was out presenting as a presenter, in apparently normal life would be, the memories would be stored in white delta for access. And I'll share more how that works in a moment. So, and these parts look very robotic and they talk in very computerized, robotic, synthesized voices. And Black Delta is dressed in silver and black robes, and they have very low demonic sounding voices. But anyway, the Deltas believe that they came from another dimension where everything is technological. That's the script I was given by my programmers, rather than human or biological. So they don't believe they're human. In again, this was a script and was installed very early when I was a young infant and toddler, because my original deltas were programmed with intense and horrible torture that caused me to just scream and scream. It was very hard when I got the memories of that. But and the delta parts who are created through dissociation were told that humans feel pain, but deltas do not. And they were told that in order to prevent ever feeling pain like that again, that they could never ever give into human or mortal feelings or thoughts again, that they were told that they must always be deltas to escape the pain. And so since deltas were robotic or computerized, they wouldn't feel pain if they accepted the script. That was the way of thinking, because computers don't feel pain. The deltas were also told that they're representatives of the immortals within the mortal body, and they were their job. So they were like immortal representatives who were to shepherd the systems as well, the memories, but also to help shepherd the systems. So white delta shepherds the presentations, and black delta shepherds the cult systems. And so shepherding, though, for the deltas meant holding and controlling the memories and skills of different parts in the presentation and cult systems, but also some of the punishment and reward lines would run through Delta and also be sent out to parts as well. They were an integral part of that as well. So I remember for example, in my White Delta programming, I remember when I was around 18 months old, I was a toddler, and I was put in a black bodysuit, but then on top of it, there was over of with of little like robotic looking arms and legs on top, put on top. And then I had a mask on too that looked kind of like a big bug. And then they turned on black lights so that they would light up and glow. And then I was told that this is when I was, and then they would call the Delta part out and they'd say, "This is what you look like." And the fathers that were programming me were also dressed in the same way. They're dressed in the same robotic looking, costume. And under the black light, you couldn't see the black bodysuit. All you saw were the robotic arms and legs. They looked like walking robots almost. And they talked to me with very computerized synthetic voice synthesizer, so that when the deltas were out, that's all they heard was a very um, monotone robotic sounding voice. And so they learned to mimic that. They were praised and given rewards when we acted like a Delta. And of course, you were punished with horrible pain if you acted like a mortal. They'd say, "Oh, don't let any mortality creep in," and then of course the pain was told mortality is creeping in. And for the Black Delta system, they wore those dark silver and black robes, and they talked in the low demonic sounding voices when I was and so, of course, and they had like black masks over their faces. And so my black deltas learned to look and sound like that as well. So, like a white delta might sound like I am Delta 341, or something like that, in a very, whereas a black delta might say, "I am Orcus 5, or something like that. So very different sounding, but similar jobs inside. Okay. I know my talking in their voices probably doesn't sound real great, but I
You
wanted
did
to kind of give an idea. Yeah.
good.
And so then the deltas and the parts under them, basically function as containers for memories and skills, and they go through extensive training to learn to store and retrieve their memories and skills correctly. So, as I mentioned, the Delta systems have extensive memory banks, and those memory banks have codes over each one with different locations for different types of memories and skills based on security level. So, you might have security level one, two, three, and four, with the deepest level, being one deeper in and four being the highest level or further out level, the lowest level. And so they do that because let's say you're in your German presentation and you're doing something, and all of a sudden, like a cult person walks by who you're not supposed to remember, but part of your brain remembers that person. Well, instantly, White Delta will snatch that memory and put it back into storage. Probably a fairly low, it's not a big security thing, so probably, level four. They'll be sitting there in one of the storage things. Or let's say that you and your family in America are talking to each other about getting each other up at 2 in the morning to go to a ritual. Okay, so you're in your American presentation, but the call parts come out temporarily. Well, if a presenter happens to hear some of that, then that will go into storage too, security storage, because the presenters aren't supposed to hear that. Okay. So anyway, the to teach the parts that contain and store memories in the memory bank, so the Jesuits do the following. A young child who would be like a memory part or holder is placed in a dark box with the opening for only their mouths. And that's gonna and in front of the box will be like lit up in blue letters the code for that memory. And then so when a Delta wanted to store a memory, it would place a memory. If it was white out, it place a small wafer in the child's mouth that would melt. And then the toddler in the side of the box then would be closed inside the box, and then they would see a memory, the memory that they were being given. Let's say that 10 minutes before they had videotaped or had filmed the child's double doing something in that would be consistent with a French presentation memory. They would film that, and then when the child is given that memory to store during the programming, they're in the box, and then on the screen on the box is going to play the memory that they're just they're given the wafer, and then the video that was just recorded is played, and that's the memory. So that's how they start teaching the child to start storing memories. Now, as time goes on, that change, of course, and it as a child gets older, they don't have to play the video. The child will go through a memory, and then internally, the delta that's been taught to do this will automatically start storing it and internally replaying it almost like a video inside, but keeping it stored under sealed storage. Um, and is this making sense?
It is,
And so
absolutely.
the yeah, so then the tower is told that they're storing the memory into the correct place, and there's extensive memory library inside this. I mean, like just hundreds and hundreds of boxes, or even thousands just lit, with different codes. Now, when the child would act in the role of a delta controller, they would see the code lit up on the outside of the box. So let's say then they'll have the child play the role of the controller, the delta, who is giving, giving the memory to a memory holder. All right, so then the delta controller will see the different codes lit up in front of the boxes, and they will, store the memory. It looks like a wafer when they're training the child, but of course later on, um, it looks like a small, like miniature computer disk, about 1 inch, that they put into the thing, and they're storing the memories, is what they're taught. Um, so each memory has a different code, and they're in different sections, as I mentioned, based on security. So with all these now, with Black Delta, it's similar but very different because each of the memories are stored and classified according to security level, as I said. And the deltas who are enabled to retrieve a memory are also classed. So there's going to be higher security memories that can only be retrieved by those with higher authorization within the system. So, like, maybe a Delta controller over low security memories could put in or retrieve low security memories. But a Delta controller with higher authorization would be needed, or even a higher controller in the system to get to the higher security memories. Okay. Now, in Black Delta, it's similar, except that in that situation, in Black Delta, you're going to have a little different program running that it's based on revelation in the Bible. And so the memories are actually placed on scrolls, and there's an angel that brings the scroll to the Black Deltas and for storage. And then they're stored, it's like a huge library of scrolls inside. And then so that kind of seals the Black Delta memory. So it looks a bit more spiritual, but it's the same concept. And for the high security, because the cold host can be asked to forget things too. Like, for example, if I would go to CERN, that's a pretty high security area to work in. So then when I would leave, my cold host would be asked to forget some of those memories. They didn't want her or him, it was male, but anyway, they didn't want him remembering. So for the higher security memories, then there's a part that looks and sounds like God, and God himself can tell the Black Deltas to forget a memory. And actually, that God part can probably tell in both deltas, but it's mainly over Black Delta too. And so this internal God part who's a scripted program part, can say, you will forget this memory. And then the cult host will forget it. It'll go into high security storage at that point. Is this making sense?
It is, yeah. I wanted to ask real quick about the memories. Are the memories stored in these specific parts and systems mostly the more kind of classified memories that they don't want the rest of the system to know about, or is this all memories that end up happening
Um,
in real life?
well, this is all memories,
Okay.
but at the same time, or it's the higher security memories, but also because the Jesuits use a shell programming for their presenters. So let's say that you're going to be presenting in France. The Deltas themselves will put together the shell for the French presenter. And there will be and then they will pull and put into the shell the memories for the French presentation, which will be the memories of the birthdays, the holidays, going to school, you know. So they actually place that. Now, the shell holds some of those memories within herself, but they will also add memories too. Now, now let's say that you're in Rome for 4 months, and then you go to France, and maybe you're doubles because you'll have a twin and two other doubles playing who you are in France. I was Janine. Let's say those three other uh, people would be, when I was younger as girls, when I was adult as women, would be playing the role of Janine or Jean in France. So they would take turns. We'd all take turns. Well, then when it would be my turn to go present in France, and the Deltas would put together my French shell as Jean, then what they would do is they would then play videos for me of the memories of what had happened during that 4 months. So that and they would call it a belief part too within my Alice system to sit as well, because Alice believes everything. So Alice is also there when the shell's been created to believe that this is what happened the last 4 months. These are my memories. And because people tend to have memories internally, almost like videos playing, if you think of a memory from your childhood or from 6 months ago, it seems very real. They'll play them very quickly, and they will play them almost fast forward sometimes, but and they won't play 4 months of memories. They'll just play important events like, oh, had a bad day at school, failed a test, or got an A plus, or had a birthday party, or we opened Christmas presents together. So they'll play important memories, because the day-to-day ones they can kind of fill in with, whatever people do. You get up, you brush your teeth. You don't have to play a video of that for all the time because that's already been installed. So then when Jean goes to present in France, she's got the last 4 months of memory supposedly installed as well because she looked at the videos and believed they were her memories, the highlights of that 4 months. So when you go, you're ready to go, oh yeah, I remember, wasn't that a great party? Oh, I love that birthday party. And and also the skills and abilities are also kept. So in that profile, in that shell too, when they will pull out the presenters, but they'll also pull out the skills and abilities for Jean. Because Jean might be able to play the guitar, whereas in Germany, Trudy played an auto harp if she was musical at all. Or maybe, and then maybe in America, maybe the American presenter would do art instead of music, for instance. So each profile has its own set of skills too. And these skills are also kept in storage, just like the memory ones. And so maybe Jean likes to play soccer because that's popular over in Europe more than here. And so she's been playing soccer, and so she's pretty decent at it, because she's been doing it since she was a little girl, and knows how to play soccer. And maybe Jean is athletic and pretty good at sports. Whereas in America, maybe the person is very, and Jean is outgoing and likes people and enjoys chatting with people. Whereas maybe in America, the child is very shy and very non-athletic. So these are profiles that are in the shell, but then also the skills and abilities are pulled out of the Delta skill storage and added as well. And then let's say they want to create a temporary position or profile for a mission. Like let's say Trudy in Germany is asked, you're going to go down to the train station, get on, and then we want you to go and sing in a nightclub because we want you to seduce someone so that you can get information from them, you know. Well, let's say that normally Trudy can't sing worth a thing. Well, but they can pull the skills of a singer out of storage and add it to her profile so that for that night she can go and sing and do her job and then come back and forget she ever did. That goes into high security if you're doing a mission like that. So
Yeah.
they can do things, or they can even pull together temporary personalities for a mission, and then put the skills away, afterwards too. So Delta also protects the skills as well. And the assassin skills are held in Delta storage as well. Um, the ability to use a garrote or to use a knife or a rifle are held because in the order, all the children are taught how to use weapons from an early age, and so they are held within Delta, and they can create a temporary part that can go out and do that mission if needed. Or the cult host can also draw on those skills as well. Is this making sense?
Very
Does
much.
that talk about that?
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for talking about all this. It does. It puts a lot of puzzle pieces together that I'm sure people have heard about, but maybe don't fully understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, anyway, so in our now the Jesuit Delta system were not soldiers and assassins. They did theirs a little bit differently. In our programming, Delta held the skills and the knowledge and things, but at the same time, our assassins were held in different places. Like I had spiritual psychic assassins, and those were under Nemesis, who is a spiritual theta controller. I had assassin parts, but sometimes, like my military soldiers were under beta. I had beta soldiers, and so in the Jesuit order, because beta is a fairly active um, brainwave state. Our military and soldier programming was put into beta, and then the assassin programming would sit normally inside of theta. And but then also you some of the betas were also used in assassin work. That's where you did a lot of your muscular active skills as well. So the Jesuit programming was a little bit different, I think. Okay. Whereas the deltas, their sole job was memory storage and skill storage. But then they could help, they could be told, put together someone who can run fast, someone who can climb over and do gymnastics, and who could climb up, into a second story window and be silent. And then they might say, and we want you to add the theta skill of blocking people hearing you. So you're super fast and super silent. So they might pull from skills from several different systems and put them together for one job. Is that making sense? Now, that wouldn't be behind a shell, though, if you're doing it temporarily like that. Your normal presentations are out with families and husbands and children, you'll have a shell because to make the person look and sound like the same person all the time. So now part of my Delta system, though, too, in the center of Delta system was a very young child who was brightly lit, and they called her Star and she was considered immortal. And so the Deltas, their job was to protect Star too. So they go through their days and they would, they love Star. That was the one emotion they had, was love for Star. So they would do anything to protect her and keep her happy. And so she was the immortal that they were trying to help our our program systems to help be basically be happy, by ascending, because in the Jesuit philosophy, you ascend if you obey your programming, you descend into mortality if you disobey it. So the Delta's job was to help us ascend into immortality, and I'll go into that more in a moment. This is kind of the connection. So Star was like the little immortal for their system in the center of the system. And they really believed she was an immortal sitting there. Now, it was actually what happened is when I was a fetus, the programmers inserted a fetoscope with a bright light, almost blinding. When you're a fetus, you feel like you're going blind. And then they go, this is a star, and that's you. You're a star. You're a bright light. And that's why, when I first saw Star, I couldn't even, it was like blinding inside. I couldn't even see her. She was so bright. And it took a while to get rid of the demonic attachments to her and just to get to know her that, oh, this is a little young part of me that believes she's an immortal or a star. Do you have any questions?
I just wanted to comment, it's interesting that they use the terminology star, and
Hmm.
we see that emulated so much in things like Hollywood. That word takes on a life of its own in the real world too, which I'm sure, has some type of meaning behind it. But I just thought it was fascinating that that was the name.
Hmm. Well, and the Jesuit Jesuits, all right, I'm going to go into immortal programming now, but first, do you have any questions about Delta before I?
One question I did want to ask, to encourage the kind of robotic and computerized personality type identity, did they have
Mhm.
those parts interface more with technology than maybe some of the other parts in different systems?
Oh, oh yeah. And when I was three, now the Jesuits also they rent six. MI6 is Colonel Green's house. Now I know there's people that say, who have worked for sixes ago, there's no Colonel Green house, blah blah blah. Well, most people, even if you work for six, don't know about it, but it's where they do the training of the children. And it was named after Colonel Green who funded it supposedly. But anyway, but six does have a section for training children, and it's very extensive. And they have a room there where they have a huge computerized system as well. And in the programming labs in the Jesuit laboratories, it's a huge computer, and they actually attach you to it. And it also, they tell you you're syncing with the computer and your brain is, you know, well, that's a programming script, to be honest. Um, but what it was the computer would speak in the very robotic voice too. And then now every system in the Jesuit programming has a mother, a father, and a child. So the father was the immortal over the technical dimension, supposedly. And the mother I know this is sounds cheesy, but they call her the motherboard for the Delta system. And so in this interface with the computers, motherboard would speak, and then, and then you hear from it. He's called Teclon from that dimension, and then the child, you're the Delta system is their child, kind of, and the deltas were programmed to believe that if they ever left their tetrahedron inside, that the outside world is extremely painful, that they could not breathe in the oxygen, that the burn skin would start burning. When I was a little kid, they even sprayed me with acid during this part of the programming so that when it's a mild acid, but it stung like crazy. So that, if you're they told the delta to step outside and see what the mortal world was like for a moment. Oh my gosh, was it painful. And so they taught the deltas with many setups like that. You don't want to ever leave your delta city inside. You never want to interact with the outside world. It was, and so it took a long time of talking to the deltas to help them see it's not really like that. You know, you can come out and interact with the outside world and you're not going to shrivel and your skin isn't going to start burning and you can breathe. Yeah, and because I really thought they were from another dimension and that the tetrahedron was protecting them. So it took a while to really work through that programming script as well internally. That no, they're just parts of me with a lot of programming. I know you're wondering about AI interface. They would do a little of that, but not a lot, at least in my programming. Now they did machine programming, and that is a form of AI, and that's a whole other thing that I could probably go into in another time. The machine programming, which is also driven by computer, but it's a very specific purpose.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just curious because it seemed like that would maybe help encourage, if they were trained around more computers and technology than actual human interface, that it could maybe assist that personality to take on that form a little bit easier.
Well, when the deltas were out, like they have a little tetrahedron type thing that, when they have a measured delta city with people who are playing the parts of the deltas and the robots. And of course, there are banks of computers all around there too, like I said, to represent the memory banks. And you could talk to the computer and say, computer plot code A134, and it would start playing the memory on the screen. So they did have that kind of technology, if that's what you're talking about. They did use computers some like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, yeah, the programming labs, yeah, they had a whole room with computers and four walls that they used for that. Okay, immortal programming. So, Delta theology is based upon ascending and descending. I'm just giving you a little background. So they believe that what they believe, the Jesuits believe, is that their members are actually immortals trapped in mortal shells. Okay. And that if you work hard, you will ascend to higher level to, and become less and less mortal. But your mortal or lower nature will always be pulling you to descend. That's the basic philosophy of the Jesuit order is ascension and descension. So if you obey your programming and you do everything, you're ascending. If you disobey your programming, you're descending and becoming more mortal. And so that was the theology I was taught as a baby and all my life. But the programming is also reliant on the person using their imagination to internalize the scenarios they're given by the programmers. And everything I've been telling you is that, like imagine internalizing the computer banks, Well, but then there's another form of programming internally, which happens at 2 a.m. every day in a Jesuit system. And in this program, there's a part that's called creator. And creator is considered an immortal inside. And she's a core split. And so what her job to do at 2 a.m. every morning, she was taught to sing each system online. And I'll explain that in a second. So each day my system would go through a full reboot at 2 a.m. And so what Creator was doing is she was taught to create each system through song. So she believes she's creating it. Now, this is what her programming was. So as an infant, like my primary program was named Mateo, and he would stand dressed in like Creator's outfit or robe. It's like a multicolored translucent rainbow robe. And he would stand next to me and he would hum a note. He would just go like, oh. And as a baby, he wanted me to sing it. Now I couldn't sing it, but by the time I was several months old, because we were all genetically enhanced, I could start to hum. Hmm, so I could start humming. And at first I'd be off, but even if every attempt he praised heavily until finally before I was a year old, I could hum several notes. And these were the foundational notes for the systems. Okay, so the part, so Creator was internalizing what Mathea was also modeling for her. So by the time I was a year old, I could sing a full, I could hum a whole full scale. Ah. And so as I was able to do that, and then he would tell me as I tried to follow him, he'd say what a good creator I was, what a good job I was doing. Then, and the reason they did this, they learned that over the many decades of programming infants, that the earlier in infancy programs like this are installed, the easier it was for my developing brain to fully internalize the programming and to not question it later on. So by the time I was a year and a half to 2 years old, I could start singing my systems into being. So each night at 2 a.m., Creator would sing her systems into being just as she had been taught as an infant. And so this was not only a system-wide reboot, but it was also reminding each system to function in exactly the way they were programmed with no deviation. So Creator would start singing her song, the first notes. As she's singing, then another core split called pi, like the radius of a circle and all that. Well, the pi would then begin creating my system grids in tandem with Creator Song. They would start lighting up. They begin lighting up, and it was beautiful. You see like this little light line of blue light, and then it would start growing, and until you saw the full grid, eventually created. And this took years to internalize. But so every day that's what they do at 2 a.m. is Creator would be singing the song for the systems, and as the notes change for each system, then Pi would start creating the grids. And then as she's doing that, then the song would change, and then Creator would start singing different notes, and the elements would start appearing. Because in the Jesuit programming, you have 7 elements. And so the elements would begin appearing like, and they look beautiful and bright lights. They look like uh, different colored, brightly lit beams. But then as she's singing, they begin running through the grids to enclose the parts because the elements were barriers between systems. And so as they start running through the systems faster and faster, they start to look flashes of light, of sparkling light. So air might be like a blue light with silvery sparkles, and fire might be a red light with orange and yellow sparkles and things like that. And earth would be like a kind of a bronze colored light with different colored sparkles. So then the elements would begin running through their grids and close the parts within the grids. And then as each system came online, then the top controllers in each systems who look like stars would start appearing too and start singing. So for your systems, your top controllers, you might have like for the presentation systems, you would have the stars for Pleiades appear and start singing, and Orion start singing. And then you would have Andromeda and Galatea, who are high system controllers, and they look like stars. And they would begin singing their songs because these are considered immortals within the systems. Because in the Jesuit theology, an immortal is also called a star. Okay. And then in theta system, it would be like a blue-black star, but blazing with light would start singing. And so all the different systems, land was the system, it would be kind of an aqua colored star and they'd be so bright you couldn't even look at them as they begin singing. So they're singing as they come on board or online and start singing their songs for their systems. And as each so as and then so then as they're singing, then the grid would start becoming populated with like the trees, the three trees would start appearing on the grid. And then the different areas like Wonderland would start appearing on part of the branches of the tree. And, Oz would start appearing another part, you know, Pinocchio system would start coming on, all the different systems would start coming on board. Theta would start showing up. And in the roots of the tree down beneath the grid, you'd start seeing your internal communicators would be start showing up and the communication lines between systems and your internal like your internal hell and punishment and your celestial city high in the branches. So hell would be at the base and then the celestial realms would be at the base, top of the tree. So they're singing their system into being. Now, and one reason too, any mistakes in their song back would let creator know that there are parts in that system who are not fully in compliance with their programming. So let's say you're doing healing work and you're trying to heal, let's say your Lambda system. And let's say Lambda's song is da yeah, da 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 ha, ha, ha. Well, and then Lambda's singing da 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 ha. Well, the creator knows immediately, like there's a problem in Lambda. Some of those parts aren't singing, they are not functioning the way they should. So it's also a feedback system. Then creator originally, her job was to report to external programmers, and she was taught to view the external programmers as immortals too, or representatives of the immortals or as stars, to report to them, hey, this system's off, and she would know exactly where because she would be listening to their songs and she could tell exactly where they were faltering. So, and then also standing around creator internally, this is internalized, were 12 immortals or stars who were also called watchers. And their job was also, along with her, to monitor the songs, just in case creator wasn't doing her job so well. These 12 watchers or immortals, their job was also to monitor the songs of the parts and to see if there's any deviation. And they were dressed in shiny, translucent robes and each of the 12 was associated with a particular system that they were monitoring. But they also looked like my external primary programmers. I had 12 programmers as a child who would also listen to the feedback when I was young. We would sing back that they would call up the system controllers, they would sing their song, and they could also tell if there's any deviation. So they'd originally taught me how to do this, and I internalized it. So they could also report system glitches or failures to the programmers. Okay, so is this making sense the way I'm describing it?
Yeah, it blows my mind that a human can learn, in a sense, to gain the capabilities of like being tuned like an instrument to where
Oh yeah.
give
Well,
an indicator.
they start when you're in the womb. So a full system call at this level for would be, "Mm." That's what it would sound like if you could hear it. I can't do it like it's very it sounds almost like a pipe organ doing it though. It's very goes to a deep bass all the way up to the high. The highest is Omicron, the lowest is Mu. So the system call and all day long too, that the systems are singing back and forth to each other and telling each other their status or sharing information because you can share a lot more through music than you can through words. And music can communicate even faster sometimes than thinking. And so they're always it's almost like a like how on the internet a computer is pinging in the internet. Well, the systems were constantly pinging this way back and forth. So you might hear parts going, but then if they stop singing that, then the parts are know, oops, they're not doing their job. So the systems were constantly doing that. So that's how that worked. So for me, it took a long time for me to help Creator and the stars to stop doing their jobs because as I mentioned last time, I journaled to them, I talked with them, I listened to their fears, I learned why they were doing their jobs. And so I even had them experiment. Like, at first, like, I knew that it's because they sang all the time inside, which were called system calls. I asked them to try experimenting with just singing a new song that's not what they were programmed to do. You know, I put on some worship music, and if I had one that I especially love, I say, why don't you try singing a few notes from this instead? And it took a long time, but they started to do that because I know can say, well, stop singing, stop doing this. You're just reinforcing the programming. So instead, I said, let's sing something else that has a different meaning. We don't have to always be calling back and forth inside. We don't have to always be reinforcing each other in there. And um, I also had to help them realize that I was loved even if I didn't run my programming. Because these systems were programmed since I was in the womb to believe that if I didn't run my programming, no one would love me. My birth mother wouldn't love me. That was the original wound. But then the fathers wouldn't love me if I didn't run my programming. And so I had to say, you can be loved even if you stop singing these songs back and forth. You'll be loved, and I will love you. So, so I had to also help my star parts realize that who really believed that they were immortals and stars trapped in the human body. I mean, because this was done when I was a baby with a fetus with a fetoscope, remember? So I had to help them gradually realize you're not really a star. You're a very young part of me, and I love you. And you don't have to be a star to be loved. And you don't have to believe that you're an immortal to have value. Because they were terrified. Well, if I'm not a star, then what am I? And does that mean I'm nothing and I have no value? And it's like, no, you have value even if you don't believe you're a star. Um, as I said, each of my 12 primary programmers was programmed to look like a star internally, and the inside parts really believed that they were deities or immortals who deserved worship. I mean, they had altars to them, and they were doing internal sacrifices to these immortals daily, and so I had to get stop that because I knew it was spiritually unhealthy to be doing it. I was just reenacting my abuse from childhood and adulthood. So I said, we need to stop doing this because it's bringing the demonic in and reinforcing. And so I asked them, and they stopped doing the sacrifices. It took some time. It didn't happen right away, but they did. And because the sacrifices were designed to reinforce the trauma and perpetuate this dissociation and amnesia inside. But I tell you, I struggled for weeks just feeling just adoration, bliss, and love for these stars inside when I first found them. I mean, I got the feelings too. It was like, star, oh. I mean, it was really, and it took a time for the belief that they're really immortals to give way to reality, that these were just program parts, tiny children who'd been deceived by their programmers. And for example, one reason that they believed this so strongly was that I remember the fathers, when they're programming me, at times they'd wear a special contact lens that would only, it was like a one-way thing. Well, anyway, I don't know how to describe the technology. And when they're programming to believe their stories that we were stars or immortals trapped in human bodies, so every once in a while, like when I was tiny, like a little flash of light would come out of their eyes. They go, and then they go, "Whoops! I let some of my immortality escape." I tell you that really was believable when you're a baby or a toddler, or a light will flash from under their arm, bright flash of light, and then it could go, "Uh-oh, let some of that immortality out. I'm supposed to be cloaking it, when I'm in my mortal shell. So they absolutely tried to trick me, and I believed them until I was older and I wore the technology and realized how it worked. But by then I was so programmed and my internal parts are so programmed that they didn't think about it. It's like, oh, that's just a little device inside my sleeve that flashes if I press a button in my hand. Yeah, because they really want the littles to believe this is true. Um, Now, like along with the stars, some of my presentation controllers were the sun, the moon, and morning star. And morning star was a communicator between the sun and the moon and the presenter systems, along with Pleiades. So these are some high level controllers. And the stars also had their reward programming, the celestial realms. And so, like the stars, when you're being programmed as a little star or immortal, then at night, when you're even a baby, they'll dress you in a star costume and they call it the star part. And then the fathers will be dressed in their star costumes, they're shining with bright light and they come into the nursery and pick you up in their arms and they carry you up these golden staircase, which was part of the programming studio, up into the celestial realms where there are clouds and lights and people's beautiful angelic voices singing, and there'd be quote unquote stars walking around, which were people, with bright light, shining so it was hard to see their faces. So the stars would be walking around. They'd go, "Welcome to the celestial realms, blessed one." We can't wait until you can join us forever, and things like that. And so they would talk, and then you get to taste. They put this sweet like substance on your tongue that tastes so wonderful when you're a baby. And they go, enjoy the food of the immortals, and things like that. So as a baby, you really wanted to become an immortal and go visit these celestial realms. I mean, it sounded pretty good. It tasted pretty good. It was wonderful. And I thought it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever experienced. And they hold you and love you and tell you what a beautiful little star you are. And then afterwards, with great sadness, they'll say, and now we must leave the celestial realms and return to the mortal realms for a time, for this is necessary too. And then with great sadness, they would carry you down the winding staircase. And as they would go on, each step would light up and a little star would be shining, next to it, as they went down each rung. I mean, it was pretty elaborate. And then the star would take the little baby star, you were baby star to the nursery and give you a loving kiss and then leave you. And then of course the and then of course the baby was told to fall asleep and then they would take the costume off and put you back in your normal um I guess baby outfit when you're while you're sleeping. And so you were convinced that the stars and the immortals had visited you and taken you up to the celestial realms. So that was my reward system, was the celestial realms. That was the reason for doing all the hard programming, was how I would get that reward. Because if I disobeyed my programming and became mortal, then I would go to hell. And they had internal hell too. And I've talked about that other times, I think. So I won't go into that now. And that was my huge punishment system. So, do you have any questions or
Does the music and songs start to kind of naturally dysfunction, like how it would in a system that dysfunctions, and then they can sort of figure it out through the song? When you're healing and like recognizing those parts, does it start to naturally dysfunction, or do those tones maintain even though you're integrating or healing or waking those parts up?
it takes a while. You can be aware of this, but it can take a while for it to stop running. That was my experience. Um, I'm sure people who might have this, it might be different. The more programming you are undoing, though, the more the system song will falter. And then for in my systems, a system faltering then was a signal for the internal punishers to come and punish too, because it's like you're becoming mortal, therefore you get to feel pain, you
Mhm.
know.
Yes.
And you will keep doing this until you go back to singing, you know. But after a while, that doesn't work anymore. When you do enough internal work, it's like, you know, there's no amount of punishment you're going to give that's going to get me to do that anymore. And then the song will falter and begin to stop completely. Then you have to deal with the belief that if the song stops, then the stars fall. This is the programming that Joseph did. Then the stars fall out of the sky, chaos ensues, the order, the grids fall apart and all the parts will fall out of their grids. And so, because I got my elements to stop running, but it took a while because the parts were convinced that if the elements weren't running as barriers between systems, then everyone would follow their grid parts, you know, because different controllers would be put into boxes in the grids when you're little, and they're told, you know, if this ever fails, you'll fall out of the grid stuff. So I did. It took a while for parts to realize, wait, what I did is I created a soft, fluffy cloud for them that was made of sheepskin, so that if they did fall out, they had something soft to land on, like a trampoline. You know, I had to use my imagine because I thought, you know, if they use my imagination to create my programming, then I ought to be able to use it to undo it. Because think about the incredible creative imagination that they had us using to create these systems every morning at 2 a.m. So I thought, why can't I create things that would undo this and help, like create my own song that I like more, or create ways of ameliorating some of the threats of, you know, like the falling out of your grids. Well, you just create a soft, fluffy trampoline that's fun to bounce on. So even if a part were to fall out, and most of them didn't, you know, some of them I think wanted to jump and just see what it felt like, but it's okay because it's not going to hurt. And the stars aren't going to fall the sky, you know, but if they do try internally, let's create a beautiful ocean inside where they can land and be safe and feel, you know, it's filled with warm water like a spa or something, you know? So there's ways you can use your imagination too, so that when your programs aren't running the way that you were told, you can create like a way to use that imagination that's kept it going for so long to create something that feels safe. And for each person, I'm giving you idea, what I did, but someone else, it may look completely different what feels and looks safe for them. And not everyone has this, Emma. I'm just describing how the Jesuits do it, but some groups do some things that are similar. Like I know quite a few groups use grids at the least, and I think quite a few groups have at least, it may look different or be put in differently, but some form of elements within the systems too. Yeah, and a lot of groups are going to have some kind of memory storage system. It may not look or sound like what I described, but they will have something for memory storage and for high security memories especially.
And you had mentioned very briefly about um like psychic assassins and
Hmm.
nations. Can you talk just a little bit about spiritual abilities and the ways that they would utilize that?
My theta systems had were used for psychic ability. So one way they would, I had like one of my theta controllers over psychic killings was Nemesis, and she also had like insanity and chaos were beneath her, and Phobos. Phobos was because their jobs, like Phobos, her job was to send like incredible fear at someone so that they would die from fear or have a horrible nightmare, you know, that would make them terrified. Um, Insanity, you know, self-explanatory. Chaos was to make the person unable to think. But Nemesis and her sisters, their jobs were to do psychic killings. And I know that could probably sound stretch believability for some people. And I understand that. I can only tell you what I saw and experienced is that I believe this ability is real. I've seen it. It uses the demonic. It's calling on the demonic too. When I would be sent out on theta missions, it was often after I'd had sex with a person back when I did this, because I created a stronger soul tie or link to the person. And once I had sex with them, then it was easier. And then we would go and I would go to their bedside and spiritually zap them. Um, there were times when I went out on mission to kill someone that way, though, and they had what we called a messenger standing over them, and I could not touch the person then because the messenger would block my way, and then I'd have to turn back. We called them the malak or the messengers, but they were angels. And in those cases, God sent an angel to stop what I did. And many in the order did this. For instance, the superior general, the occultic one, not the one in the light that's, you can look up on a website. That's not the real one. But the real SG, he will have um, several trained thetas in front of his office so that if anyone tries to come and troll by in the spirit realm and attack him, they see him immediately. I used to be theta guard for a while for the SG when I was younger. And so you're sitting there and we used to call them flybys. There'd be like, some people fly over Rome and stuff, in the spirit realm. There's a lot of spiritual activity, more than people realize. And we would see that, but it was be if they start coming into the Vatican, that was not okay. If they start coming near the SG, that was not okay. And then we would stop them and we would chase them away, or sometimes we would maim them in the spirit, or sometimes we would kill them in the spirit realm. That person never returned to their body. When visitors would come to visit the SG in the physical realm, we would be checking them out in the spirit realm too to see how armed and dangerous they were in the spirit realm. And they could feel that we were armed and dangerous too. So it's kind of like spiritually in the spirit realm, if you're coming with a an Uzi and then you see three big strong people with their own Uzis, and they're keeping their eye on you, you're not going to try anything because if you try one thing, you're going to get it. And this is all in the spirit realm. No guns, nothing. Just this is all done demonically. And we were taught as toddlers to do this. They start training very young in the theta skills. Like I remember being a baby and being taught to pick up like a ball in the room with my mind. That was a theta skill. That was a very early theta skill. And I was taught, and then one time I got mad at one of my trainers. I remember I took the ball and I bopped him with it. Like, he was mad, but he was like, wow, she can do that. She's got all this theta bill skill, So things like that. But then the babies like to have fun because they'll try to move things around the nursery, and the trainers will let them get away with a little bit as long as they're not creating chaos in there, because they realize they're learning. And then I remember like when I was older, like by the time you're about 6, you're learning how to influence someone's thinking in their mind. So, so as you're learning the skill, like you get the 3-year-olds will walk into the dining room because all the classes would eat together, and then the kids just learn this skill. They sit there and they would use we would use our skills to like get the little 3-year-old to say, "Oh, Father so and so is a big fat hairy bastard" or something, because we were doing the Jedi mind trick, getting them to say it, and and of course, then the fathers would look at us and go, "You can't do that to the little guys." I know it sounds strange, but that's the environment that was the culture I was raised in. Is but we all thought it was hilarious when we were kids learning these tricks. When you're older, you can go in and you can use that ability to influence people, so they'll let you into a high security area, and they don't even know they're doing it. That stuff you saw in the Star Wars movies was real. It wasn't just a movie, but it was a theta skill. Is this making sense?
It is. It seems very consistent amongst a lot of mind control survivors that have gone through this really
Mhm.
organized type of abuse throughout their life, that's, a big part of their training is those spiritual abilities, and I think it's fascinating just what we're capable of and all that has been really suppressed from us in us recognizing that we're capable of having spiritual gifts. They've like turned that off with society and been like, oh yeah, it's just in Marvel movies, that this happens. And, I think it needs more attention to it because it's more real than people even can imagine. Um, and it shows
Where do you,
just what
where
was
do you think they get the ideas for the movies from?
exactly. Thank you.
I mean, people are creative, but they're not that creative. I mean, they are to some degree, but a lot of that they're actually just pulling on their own memories sometimes, I think. The people, the script writers. Um, well, on my blog, I think I shared an example of a international hit that was written by a Jesuit superior general. I don't know if you saw my article. I told you about Matteo was my primary trainer as a child, and he became superior general. And when I was 29, he became the superior general. And the way you do that in the Jesuit order is the new superior general who's taking over has to theta kill the previous one. And so Matteo brought me, I I was 29 and Matteo was older. He was like, what, no, let me see now, how old was I? Yeah, I was in my 20s and he was older. He was in, his 40s. And so he and I went and and Simone came with us and one other and we all theta killed the SG and then Matteo took over. But it was hard on Matteo because this man was his mentor and a person he loved deeply. But he was told to do it, so he did, and he became the SG then. And soon after that, he wrote a poem. And when I was in my 30s, he showed me the poem in my late 30s that he'd written. Because he and I were very close. I was one of the two people he was closest to, I believe, in the order at the time. And then in 2006, Matteo died, and his poem was on his desk. And we found it, and it took 2 days, but we had a team of six of us, and we decided to set his poem to music. And Matteo loved the cello. So the original song, it had a cello lead, and it also had harp and violin. Those were his favorite instruments. And at his memorial service, we played the song that was set to his poem. And then a couple of years later, they decided to memorialize Matteo because he was loved because he was a SG for a very long time, longer than most. And so we gave the poem and the music to a musical group and they recorded it. And it's known as Viva la Vida. I don't know if you've ever heard that song.
I don't know if I have either. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Now, the original version, because it was for his funeral and in memoriam, it was very slow and sad. And there's a slow version by someone called Moodle, I think Henry Moodle, that's the closest to the original version. It's by a group called Coldplay.
Oh,
And
Coldplay. I've heard of them. I wonder if I have
yeah,
heard that song.
yeah. And the original poem or song was called Sic la Vita, which means thus is life.
Mhm.
But they changed it to Viva la Vida. And um, but anyway, that it was written by Matteo. And it's a very sad song if you listen to it because it starts out by saying, when I ruled the world, the seas rose when I gave the word. It's talking about the elements. And then he's talking about how when he lost his mentor, he never heard an honest word again. And in the song, it talks about, I hear Jerusalem bells ringing. Well, in the order we call the Vatican Jerusalem at times. And so it's a reference to when you're in Rome, you can hear the church bells ringing. And then he says, and the Catholic Calvary choir singing, because when the old SG dies and the new SG is installed, the choirs, the the orders choirs start singing in honor of him. Um, the song talks about it was a wicked and cold wind that opened the door that let me in, and it's talking about that's about the theta kill, the how cold he felt after that. Well, it's an interesting song, so if you ever get a chance, you might want to listen to it. It's about and then it talks about um my mirror, my sword, and my shield. Well, when you become a Jesuit father, they give you three things. The three fathers you love most will give you three things. The father you love most will give you a mirror on a golden chain that you wear. And then they say, we all need a mirror to show us who we truly are, meaning you need people that are honest who'll tell you who you are. A sword, and then you're given a sword, and you hand your sword to the SG and you say, this is I give you my sword, I will fight for the order. And then you give them your shield and you say, I will defend the order and its honor all of my life. So that's what I was talking about, the mirror, sword, and shield in the song. Um, anyway, and then the song says, and be my missionaries on a foreign field. Well, that's part of the oath of the Jesuit order too, that you will be a missionary in a foreign field.
I'm definitely
Anyway,
gonna look that up. I appreciate you sharing. I know that sounds like a very personal moment to both of you, and
yeah,
that's kind of neat that that got immortalized in a way. Ironically,
yeah.
we're talking about,
Oh,
Immortals.
it became an international hit. Yeah,
Yeah, and now it's, like I said, it's it's immortalized into a song that's always going to, be there. And that it seems, I know
yeah,
that that band, that Coldplay was a group that I know a lot of songs from hearing them, but I never bought their albums to like see what the songs were called. I would just hear them on the radio, and like there's a
yeah,
couple that I know by name, but now that you're saying that, like I bet I probably have heard it since they are really popular.
yeah, yeah. I'd be surprised if you haven't. Yeah,
And I'm sure a lot of people listening have heard it too. So that is really
yeah,
fascinating. And was
yeah.
there anything else with Delta and Immortals programming that you wanted to share today that we didn't get to?
Not at this point. I think I've given a pretty good overview of them, or I hope I have, at least the way the Jesuits do it.
I thought that was a wonderful presentation and a lot of insight for survivors and then people, that are sort of on the outskirts wanting to learn and help. This is all stuff that you don't hear about very often. A
Mhm.
lot of people aren't talking about this quite yet. So it's neat to sort of be ahead of the curve a little bit and learning some of this. I think all of this, learning all of this is just going to serve to help survivors as more come forward. A lot of survivors too that already are awakening and healing.
Mhm.
It's good for them to understand their system, obviously, and to understand how to heal from that. So we're all better for your work, Svali, and for these wonderful presentations that you put together for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Before we tie up, I just wanted
Okay.
to ask one quick thing, and you don't have to, talk a lot about it, but I'm just curious when you're healing from all of this and recognizing that you have these parts and these systems that are obviously a little more deeper in the system than some of the
Hmm.
other things that we've talked about, like Alice programming. Um, do
Hmm.
you do you get to keep these gifts and learning these languages? Does that all pop back up to where you're now conscious of it and you can speak a bunch of different languages and play a different bunch of different instruments, or does that kind of dissolve as you wake up?
I think it's for me, it's been a gradual process. Like I can listen to a story in French and understand it now, even though I've never had French in school.
Mm,
And the same in Italian. So it's coming back. It's been slow though because of just the huge amount of programming and fear. So it took a long time. But now I've got parts that now I haven't spoken it in years because I've been away from the order, but I can understand it now if I hear it spoken, you
interesting.
know. I mean, and sometimes like I'll hear phrases in my head, like in French or in German or Italian, and I'm co-conscious much more now when I dream in those languages too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I do dream in those languages, and that's coming out as I've worked on this. So it's a gradual process, just be, and I think it's because some of the skills I felt like I needed the most were skills for like safety, like recognizing cult people or recognizing if someone was trying to trigger me. So that's what I focus on first. It's like, well, so that person in the corner signing to me, good. And I can see it in real time now, cool, but not cool, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And then, yeah. And so those were I think the skills that my system wanted first. Um, but like I'll sit there, like with my friends, I'll be listening to a story in French, and I'll go, "Oh, that wasn't that a great story?" And they'll be like, "I didn't understand a word of it." And I'm like, "Really?" And I like, but it's really simple French, I think. And they go, "No." And I go, "Okay." You know.
Yeah, I was gonna say just because you obviously start all of this so young, and they spend so much time on it. And I was just thinking, gosh, what a shame if you don't get to use any of that or if it just goes away. So that's kind of neat that you can still take those things and, apply them potentially if, you need to use them, like you said, if you're listening to something or somebody says something, or even if you're in a foreign country, that's kind of neat
Yeah.
that you get access to that as you heal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you do. It comes back. And I've always liked music, and so some of my music skills, have come back as well. There's other skills. Now, I'm older, so I can't do the running and jumping and gymnastics I did, and I don't want to at my age, you know, but I remember doing them. But I'll give you another example. Like when I was in Arkansas, I all my life I've been afraid of guns. I was afraid to pick up a gun. I was just terrified. I just did not like guns at all. I just had a huge aversion. When I was in Arkansas for safety, my friend and I uh, decided it'd be good to have a rifle and a pistol. I didn't want a rifle though because the kickback was so hurt my shoulder because my friend had an old-fashioned rifle. So I bought a handgun and I decided to do target practice. I remember the first time I did target practice, I was thinking, this is going to explode if I and blow up in my face if I try to do the trigger. And then I realized, wait, that was programming. And then I remember they had in my presentation, they let me hold a pistol or a gun and they purposely had it blow up in my face every time I tried to use it so that I would never want to pick up a gun because they didn't want me to have, be around guns or to know I knew how to use a gun. So I mean, I was just shaking with pure terror the first few times I used it, but it didn't blow up in my face. And so then I had to get used to the noise. But then I started doing the target practice, and day after day, it got easier and easier until like within a few weeks, like I was practicing, on my stomach doing it sideways, hitting the target, rolling and doing it, and it was fun. So it came back pretty fast once I got over the terror that they instilled in my presentation. Does
Our
that make
bodies are,
sense?
it does, yeah. Our bodies
And
are,
I could hit bullseye too, and that was pretty cool. It's like, well, I can do this,
you're
dude.
like, I'm
This
a
is cool.
badass.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or I remember there's one time when I was with my ex, and he thought he was Mr. Hot Stuff, and so he was playing around with a knife, and he goes to throw it onto some drywall. He'd been doing some construction, and it falls to the ground. It goes, this is a crappy knife. No one could do that. I said, oh yeah, they can. I pick it up and I stand 10 feet back behind where he was. I throw it and it hits right on. And he looks at me, he said, how'd you do that? I said, it's easy. I went and I got it and I took it back and I went thwap and I did it again. And I said, you hold it this way and you throw it this way. Well, I'd never thrown a knife in my life consciously before that I know of, but I could throw it and hit a target and all of a sudden.
I love
So
that now you
it's,
can have fun with those things that, other people exploited for bad things, and you can now use them, to benefit your life and have fun. And, that's wonderful.
yeah, target practice is fun. I mean, I don't want to use it to ever hurt anyone, and I was only learning it for self-defense,
Mhm.
but it was fun to know that I could do some things I didn't know I could do. It was very validating too that my body memory came back and I could remember.
Yeah, and you could do them with people that you care about in like, a
Hmm.
hobby type way where you're doing it for like practice and for something fun to do.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Or my ex-husband was like 6 feet two, and he weighed like 190 pounds. And sometimes we would just like wrestle for fun. And he'd always pin me down because my presentation, I was programmed to be a wuss. So it'd be like, I pinned you, I pinned you. Well, after a few weeks of that, one time I got mad. And so I so we were wrestling. I went, boom. And I threw him to the floor and I pinned him. And he looked at me and he's like, what the? I said, oh, I just got tired of you being a little snot with me. Yeah.
You're
You're
like, where
not the
did
only
that
one.
come from?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, it's because I knew how to do it. My body knew. So anyway, enough of that. So yes, skills do come back with healing. Or
Thanks
at
for
least,
sharing that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
those
you
fun
don't lose
stories
everything.
from your own personal life too. It's cool to know all of that about you also.
Yeah.
And so share with us where people can connect with you and purchase your books. You have so many of them. I have just a few up here, but you just finished your three-part testimony, which we talked about a little bit last time that came out. Part three is now out to complete the trilogy of her memoir. All these amazing
Hmm.
books. They're wonderful. And she has so many more. I just have a few other ones here, a couple that I talked about in the intro. But where can people
Yeah.
connect with you and purchase your books if they want to learn more?
Well, I have a blog at SvaliSpeaksAgain.wordpress.com. And on Amazon, if you look up Svali, there's some books by me. But I do want people to know that my autobiography and then my book, It's Not Impossible, are written by me. But there's some other Svali books, like the Svali Chronicles, I which someone else put up and used my name. And I've contacted Amazon many times. I said, "Did you know there's people using this?" And they'll take it down for a week after I do that, and then they've done it 4 times. And there's a few other books like that that I've not authorized where they're using my name and putting articles of mine up. And like at programming deprogrammingwiki.com, I think too, there's some of my books for free there. So I'm just letting people know that so that you know, but my autobiography is by me and it's not impossible. And I also was a co-author with 2 books. One is called Finding Freedom, Healing from Ritual Abuse and Mind Control. And it's really a huge volume and it's pretty expensive because it's like hundreds of pages and it's in depth, but it's a good resource as well for learning more. And there's also a book called Prayer Warriors 2 that has prayers relevant to issues surrounding mind control and programming for survivors.
That's so awesome. And you've sent me those links before. I've put them in the last couple
Uh-huh.
episodes since becoming aware of them.
Thank you.
I'll also put
Hmm.
them in this episode show links. So for you guys listening, I'm gonna have all those resources in the show notes along with the books that Svali was just talking about. And make sure that you're supporting the ones that she authored, and going to her actual account on Amazon and purchasing her books. And I
Yeah.
do encourage you guys to scoop up her three-part autobiography. It's just amazing. You get to learn so much about her. She ties in a lot of education on healing, and there's chapters devoted to some of these things that we just talked about today, different programs that she was going through at that part of her life, and some education on that, just like how we talked about today, intertwined. So you get education and you get to learn about her all in one, which is really cool. And Svali, just thank you again for coming on and for putting these presentations together, for your courage over all these years to just keep speaking out. I know this stuff it's draining. It can be really difficult to keep talking about, and I love that you've helped so many people on the survivor end, the advocate end, and I love your how you've
Thank
tailored
you.
so much of what you do to therapists too, and to people helping survivors on the therapeutic end. You've done just so much for this community, and I really believe that a lot of what we know today, and one of the reasons why we're so far ahead right now in 2025 is because you and some others had the courage to step forward before there was a movement. You guys helped create what we see today. So I really appreciate you and your mission and all the work that you've done and how you've really embodied the Holy Spirit in so many ways, and you're such a walking example of his word and his miracles. So we really appreciate you and love you so much.
Okay. Emma, thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing too. Thank you for having a place where survivors can have a voice and where people who are whistleblowers and have testimonies can share and get the word out too. I appreciate you so much.
It was needed, and it's nice to see other people are doing it and we're doing it, and hopefully it'll just keep inviting the conversation onto other different types of platforms that don't normally talk about this. And it's a great honor to get to work with people like you and to learn
Mhm.
how our world really functions and how our body works. So I
Mhm.
really appreciate you coming on and supporting. It's wonderful, and we all have our little part in this, and it's great that we can all now come together and you know really share these messages and get the word out and do it in a bigger way than that's ever been done before. So I really look forward to having you on again, hopefully soon, and we can pick some more topics to talk about. If you guys
Mhm.
listening have questions or specific requests on things that you'd really like to hear from Spally about, go ahead and leave it in the comments. And then, of course, visit the show notes where I'm going to have all of her links and her additional resources of the books that she's co-authored, her blog. Please go support, share this episode, share her content, go support her work and buy her books. You guys can really learn so much in such a short amount of time, versus how I learned when I first started before I knew where to find people like Spally, searching the internet and just digging and trying to figure out, where something good is to learn. It's really nice when people like Spally can just create that content for us and we can just go learn a lot in one space. So I really encourage you guys to go dig into what she's done on this podcast, other podcasts, her blog, books, and anywhere else that you guys can get your hands on any of the work that she's done. So, you guys, thank you so much for listening. God bless you all, and
Mhm.
we will see you next time.